Welcome to Medieval Murder, the podcast that brings all things gruesome and historical to the comfort of your own home or car or wherever it is you're listening from. My name is Hannah Purtymun, and I'm here with my father, Kevin Purtymun.
Hello.
To discuss some of the most famous and infamous murders that took place in the medieval and early modern periods. Medieval Murder came to be first as a blog, then as an Instagram, and now as a podcast, after I finished my master's dissertation on homicide in early medieval England. The podcast will feature some of the most famous murders in medieval history, some mini-episode series on different types of medieval murders, and interviews with historians and history enthusiasts alike. Welcome to our Halloween special, which will cover the history behind popular fiction's Dracula. Everyone has heard of Bram Stoker's literary masterpiece, Dracula, but stories about the real-life murderer that the story was based on are less mainstream. Vlad Tepes III, otherwise known as Vlad the Impaler, was the voivode of Wallachia, or prince of modern-day Romania in the 15th century. Vlad the Impaler was a member of the House of Basarab lineage, the first line of princes to exist in Wallachia. However, in 1436, the House of Basarab was split in two due to a conflict between the Dynasty and Draculesti branches of the family. Each claimed the other was illegitimate when it came to the throne of Wallachia. Now, with some geographical background, Wallachia, Transylvania, and Moldavia all make up modern-day Romania.
Okay, so Transylvania is really a place.
It was, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because, growing up as a kid, Transylvania kind of played big in Halloween, and it's like, I always thought it was a fictitious place. But it's
No, it was real.
So they had a kingdom, and it was Wallachia?
Yes.
And they were, two families were the ruling class, or there was two sides of the family that were the ruling class?
Yeah. So, Dracula, or Vlad the Impaler, was a member of the Draculesti branch, whereas his cousins were the Dynasty branch.
So did they have a king and queen, since he was kind of a prince, or what did they call the rulers?
The emperors.
Okay.
They were emperors, yeah. Or the prince. I mean, at one point he was a prince, but also emperor.
Okay, so he may get to be an emperor here. We'll find out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So Vlad Tepes' father, Vlad II, was ruler of Wallachia from 1436 to 1442, and again from 1443 to 1447. It was at the beginning of his reign that he became known as Vlad Dracul, or Vlad the Dragon, in relation to the Draculesti branch of the House of Basarab, that was otherwise known as the Order of the Dragon. Dracul can also be translated as the Devil, which some have attributed to the ruler's diabolical cruelty, a feature that was inherited by his son.
So was that his name, Dracul, or was that his nickname?
That was his nickname.
Okay, so he wasn't an upfront guy if people are nicknaming him the Devil.
Yes.
Okay.
It seems like everybody in this area in this time were pretty upfront about their cruelty.
Okay.
Yeah. Vlad Tepes III was most likely born sometime between 1428 and 1431 in Transylvania. He became known by the people of Wallachia as Dracula, as he was the son of Dracul, or as Vlad Tepes, which Tepes means the impaler, as his favorite method of capital punishment was impaling. So Dracula had 4 brothers and 2 half-brothers who were illegitimate. During his childhood, his father Dracul used him as a political pawn, even giving him and his brother Radul to the Turks as prisoners for several months in order to demonstrate Dracul's loyalty to the Ottoman Empire. It was during these few months that Dracul became convinced that his sons had been butchered for the sake of Christian peace, and even wrote to his captors about his sadness at their deaths. But they had not been killed and were eventually released.
So were they, the people of Romania, of You know, gave him to the Ottomans.
So the Ottomans were Muslim, and I believe I believe Transylvania, Wallachia, and Moldavia were all Christian.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
Well, it's out there now.
So Vlad II Dracula was beheaded along with his oldest son Mercia in 1447 by the Transylvanian crusader John Hunyadi, who had been battling for power in Wallachia for years. Hunyadi then placed Vladislav II, who was Polish and who was a member of the dynasty side of the family, on the throne.
Little coup attempt there.
Yeah.
Successful.
During the second half of 1448, Vladislav II, the then ruler of Wallachia, left to battle against the Ottoman Empire. So, because they were on the border. So Wallachia, Transylvania, and Moldavia are all on the border of the Ottoman Empire, which is the Turks. And so he's like, I'm going to go campaign against them.
So was it a similar campaign to like the Crusades? Christians battling Muslims, or
Similar.
or was it all land-based?
I think it was both. So during his absence, Vlad Tepes, Dracula, made his way into Wallachia and took the throne for himself. However, Vlad was only able to rule for a couple of months until he was forced to abdicate by Vladislav II, who came back, kicked him off the throne, and exiled him to Edirne in the Ottoman Empire, which is a city in modern-day Turkey. So Vlad Tepes lived in exile in Turkey for the next 8 years, during which time little is known about his life.
So when they're overthrowing each other, like when he came in and he took the throne back, was it did he have followers? Did he have an army? How?
So Vladislav II probably had a very substantial army behind him. Anybody who survived the attack on the Ottoman Empire came back with him and probably was like, I have all these men. And Vlad the Impaler probably didn't have as many men as the current king. And probably was just like, okay, I don't want to die. I'll get off. Sometime in 1456, Vlad moved to Brasov in Hungary and was given a semblance of power later that year by Hunyadi to defend the Transylvanian border. So this is 8 years later. And so Hunyadi is like, okay, you can do something for us. You can move back to Transylvania, or you can move back to Brasov and help us by defending the border. However, Vlad took his chances, and on July 3rd, 1456, he assumed the Wallachian throne and assured the inhabitants of Brasov that he would defend them against an eventual Turkish attack. He then marched into Wallachia with a small army and killed the current emperor Vladislav II in order to solidify his power. So they gave him a little bit, and he took it all.
So he came back to
Brasov.
He came back to Brasov, and they said, okay, we're going to give you some guys. Now, Brasov, was it in Wallachia? Or where?
It was in Transylvania.
It's in Transylvania. So they brought him back, and he's like, okay, I'll defend the border, and as long as I'm here, I'm going to take over. You guys gave me some. You gave me a mini army, so here we come. Okay.
And then he killed the current king, or the current emperor, and became emperor. During his reign, Vlad began to take territory from pretenders to the throne, who were a risk to his hold on Wallachia. So these pretenders were members of the dynasty side of the family who believed they had a claim to the throne.
Okay.
So anybody who had a possible claim to the throne, he was like, I'm going to take your territory and probably kill you.
Okay, so the family feud is going on.
Yeah. So it was in this way, taking the territory from pretenders, that he justified the death and destruction that he wrought over the country. So during this time that he's taking all his territory, 41 merchants from Brasov were found in Wallachia and were impaled, while another 300, including many youths who acted as informers for the Saxons, were burned alive.
Okay, so when you impale somebody, what is that?
It's a big wooden stick, and you stick it through their chest. Usually you stick it through their back, and so they're stuck, laying on their back with a big spike through their chest.
Okay, and then the kids were burned.
Yeah, they were burned alive.
Okay.
Yeah. At the same time, he launched an attack against the district of Sibiu, plundering and burning several villages to the ground. So he's just wreaking havoc on anybody he thinks is going to be against him.
So, okay, he's getting rid of his enemies, solidifying his position.
In March 1460, Dan the Pretender, supported by the inhabitants of Brasov, crossed the mountains with a body of soldiers in an attempt to remove Dracula, or Vlad the Impaler, from the Wallachian throne. In the ensuing battle, he was defeated and taken prisoner. So then Vlad the Impaler gave orders that a grave be dug for him, but others say that he actually had to dig it for himself. And the burial service was said over him while he was still alive, after which the executioner cut off his head. This was to serve as an example for other pretenders to the throne who may try and take the Wallachian Empire.
So he's the first guy I've heard that went to his own funeral service.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Yes, he did. Because Dan the Pretender had received support from the inhabitants of Fagaros and Amla, in August 1460, Dracula sent an army which plundered and burned these districts without mercy, and the villagers, led by their priests, were all impaled on the orders of Vlad the Impaler. So he made them walk to their own death, led by their priest, to be impaled, probably in order, in like a line of impaling.
Wow. So who's going to be left in Transylvania, Romania when we're done here?
Doesn't sound like a lot of people.
Yeah, it seems like he's wiping out entire districts.
But he's solidifying power, he's solidifying power and getting rid of all the people who could create an uprising against him.
Okay.
Yeah. And in this way, he's also, wreaking havoc, causing terror and fear throughout the country, so nobody's going to want to do anything against him, because they're like, oh, we're going to be impaled and forced to sit at our own funeral.
Yeah, no, I mean, psychologically, if you're living there, you're like, just doing my thing. Go Dracula, go Vlad.
Yeah. After this, he decided to campaign against the Turks and the Ottoman Empire. So a letter written by Vlad that still survives today to King Matthias of Hungary on 11 February 1462 stated that 23,884 men had been slain in this campaign, and that it was possible for him to give such a precise figure because their heads had been carefully collected, not including those who were burned in their houses and whose heads were not presented to state officials. So anybody who had been murdered, they collected their heads, so they knew how many people they killed.
And this was
against the Ottoman Empire.
Okay. Wow. So you makes you wonder how many people he killed, his own people he killed.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people.
Well, and then, yeah, it's mind-blowing that you're killing the people that might be in your army to fight the Ottomans, but yet you still killed 23,000 Ottomans.
So he had followers, and it was during his like exile in those like 8 years that we don't know about him that he was probably amassing followers throughout, Wallachia and Transylvania.
Yes.
He's probably networking and getting all these people.
Yeah. It's like we'll join you, or you're going to kill us.
Yeah. And so after he killed these, 23,000 people, Vlad's reputation began to precede him, and anyone who heard that he was coming to conquer them would flee in fear, including many of the inhabitants of Constantinople. So if you heard that Dracula was coming, you fled into the hills.
Yeah, I'd be getting out of town. I think unless I had unless I had a lot of guys with me, a lot of people, I think I'd be getting out of town.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to be impaled. In response to Vlad's letter, Matthias Corvinus met him in Transylvania in November 1462. They negotiated for weeks over whether Matthias would support Vlad in an attack against the Ottoman Empire. However, the King of Hungary did not want to be involved in a war, did not want to begin a war, and instead had Vlad captured and imprisoned. So they negotiated for weeks, and then he was like, nah, I'm going to imprison you so that you don't attack the Ottomans right now. So Vlad was then imprisoned for 14 years until he was released after a request was made by King Stefan III of Moldavia because he wanted Vlad to retake the Wallachian throne so someone would sit upon the throne who was also an enemy of the Ottoman Empire.
So the King of Hungary imprisoned Vlad.
Yes.
For 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so the King of Hungary imprisoned him for 14 years. Somebody else was on the Wallachian throne at this time.
Yeah, I'm not sure who.
Obviously kind of maybe more friendly with the Ottomans.
Mm-hmm.
And now 14 years later, they're going to let Vlad out.
Yeah.
And they're going to put him back on the throne.
We'll kind of see. See.
Because that just seems like we're going to have a guy who already was raging. Now he's been locked up for 14 years. He may be really hard to deal with now.
Yeah. So Vlad was released and initially settled in Pest, Hungary, while he reestablished his followers and amassed an army. Because, it's been 14 years. All his people have dispersed. In 1475, Vlad moved back into Transylvania, where he could more easily network to his people. And then finally, in November 1476, Vlad was recrowned Emperor of Wallachia after having defeated the other pretender to the throne, Basarab Leta, in battle with the help of Stefan III of Moldavia. So Stefan III, wasn't initially gonna help him, but he settled in Hungary. And eventually he was like, okay, we're gonna help put you on the throne, basically.
Get you out of my country.
Yeah. So in 1476, he was recrowned Emperor of Wallachia. However, Vlad's third reign was going to be a short one, as Basarab Leota returned to Wallachia with an Ottoman army to fight against Vlad. Vlad the Impaler, along with his entire army, was massacred in late 1476 in battle against Basarab. And to this day, no one knows where he was buried.
Yeah, I could see where you'd keep that grave a secret. You wouldn't want people coming and drawing any power from it.
Especially after that.
You wouldn't want to make him a martyr, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he technically reigned 3 different times, 2 very short periods and 1 decent length.
So so he impaled people. Mm-hmm. He made people cut their heads off. He led people in battle. He battled with his own people to gain control. He battled with the Ottoman Empire. Did he ever fight with Hungary?
Not with Hungary.
Just within those 3 districts?
Well, he didn't fight Moldavia either.
Okay.
Just Transylvania, Wallachia, and then the Ottoman Empire.
So, where do we get Dracula? Where do we get how do we make the jump from
Vlad the Impaler to vampire?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do we make that jump to he was a vampire?
So, stories of Vlad's cruelty began to circulate during his imprisonment and after his death. And these stories included Michael Beheim wrote a lengthy poem about Vlad's deeds, allegedly based on his conversation with a Catholic monk who had managed to escape from Vlad's prison. The poem was performed at the court of Frederick III, Holy Roman Empire, during the winter of 1463. So this is still when Vlad's alive that this is happening. And according to one of Beheim's stories, Vlad had 2 monks impaled in order to assist them in going to heaven. Also ordering the impalement of their donkey because it began braying after its master's death. So I think this, in assisting them to go to heaven, is probably kind of a mockery.
Oh, of the Catholic faith.
Yes. And then there was a rumor that while in prison, Vlad caught rats to cut them up into pieces or stick them on small pieces of wood, so impaling them, because he was unable to forget his wickedness. So they think he's just a psychopath.
He's not sounding normal to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, but.
And then according to Antonio Bonafini in his chronicle Historia Pannonica, Turkish messengers came to Vlad to pay respects, but refused to take off their turbans according to their ancient custom, whereupon he strengthened that custom by nailing their turbans to their heads with 3 spikes so they couldn't take them off. So man's got some rage. Man's got some rage.
Got some rage, some control issues.
Yeah. And then stories about Vlad's plundering raids in Transylvania were clearly based on eyewitness accounts because they contained accurate timelines and details. And they described Vlad as a demented psychopath, a sadist, a gruesome murderer, a masochist, worse than Caligula and Nero.
Wow.
So he's a terrible person. And, I mean, I think they see him as very bloodthirsty, which could be kind of the connection there.
To the vampire?
Yeah. I mean, he's thriving on impaling people, on collecting their heads, on,
Yeah, the collecting the 23,000 heads that's a statement there.
Mm-hmm. The last story we have was that Vlad had a big copper cauldron built and put a lid made of wood with holes in it on top. He put the people in the cauldron and put their heads in the holes and fastened them there. Then he filled it with water and set a fire under it and let the people cry their eyes out until they were boiled to death. He also invented frightening, terrible, unheard of tortures. He ordered that women be impaled together with their suckling babies on the same stake. The babies fought for their lives at their mother's breasts until they died.
Vlad's messed up.
Yeah, Vlad's got some issues. Vlad's definitely got some issues. So even recent history, so from when he was still alive, these stories are going around. And so I think they survive because, he's such a cruel person. He's just, he's the perfect person to write about in Victorian London.
Yeah, well, I also think part of it is he's the Dracula, a vampire, seems it might be a little more acceptable than telling the true story of Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, because I mean it is pretty horrific what he did.
It's horrific, but it's also very political and war based, so I think it's not as Dracula's gonna get you in the middle of the night.
Right. I can see the bloodthirstiness, morphing into the vampire. And I can see where it might be a little more socially acceptable to tell the Dracula story as a vampire than as what he really was.
Yeah, which was just a bloodthirsty ruler.
Yeah, kind of a maniac.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where we get the thing that, in order to kill a vampire, you got to use a wooden stake.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's true.
You know,
That's probably, it is probably why that's around.
when I first heard the term Vlad the Impaler years and years ago, I always thought he was a vampire hunter.
I mean, that would make more sense.
That he was the guy hunting vampires. I didn't realize that he was um, who vampires were based on.
Yeah.
So, some of the things that come up at Halloween, are always, you see Dracula costumes, you see Frankenstein costumes, and I know Mary Shelley wrote that
Mm-hmm.
on Lake Lucerne one summer. That was really um, a really odd summer because it was raining all the time. But I don't know. We had to look and see if there was any basis for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. If there was any historical stuff
I don't
that
think
related to
there
that.
was, because it was just a writing competition between her and some other writers
I think was
at a lake house that summer, and they were doing a writing competition one night, and she created the best story
okay.
because it was like a
Yeah,
stormy, blustery night by candlelight, and they were like, let's tell each other ghost stories.
yeah. I don't know if Byron was there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Lord Byron was there.
Yeah, and it was an odd summer, and I think it was the year that Krakatoa went off, and because of the volcanic stuff, it kind of changed the climate for a year, and they thought they were going to Lake Lucerne, and it was going to be this sunny, great summer, and it actually turned out to be kind of a dreary, wet summer, and they could have stayed in England and had the same experience.
Yeah.
It's gruesome when you really think about it. I mean, it's educational in that you can see. So this was the 1400s, but you look at like what Stalin, what Lenin did, what the Tsars did, what Hitler did. I mean, it's a bloody. I mean, it's got a long history of just kind of genocide and wiping people out.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and you can see. I know it'd be interesting to follow that lineage. I mean, they just, yeah, we're just life is cheap. We're gonna kill you. We're gonna line you up against the wall and shoot you. We're gonna impale you. We're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna we're gonna do whatever it takes to stay in power.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. I mean, that's what I was sitting here thinking, wow, okay, now a lot of the history is making sense. I mean, you had the Crusades, you have the Ottoman Empire, you had the slaughter of the Armenians based on religiousness. I mean, if there was a difference, we're finding the seam in that difference, and we're not going to listen to any reason. We're just going to wipe you out.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Crazy. Yeah. All right. So thank you for listening to Medieval Murder, and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
If you have any listener questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please feel free to reach out via our Twitter account @MurderMedieval, our Instagram account @MedievalMurder, or via email at info.medievalmurder@gmail.com. And if any of you are interested in rocking some Medieval Murder merchandise or in reading some of our book reviews and blog posts, take a look at our website, medievalmurder.org.
I want to say that we've got a new logo for the Medieval Murder podcast. You can still get the old one, but the new one is rocking.
Tune in 2 weeks for our next podcast.